Hey, Liam here from Digiwaza Multimedia. Thanks for joining me in the second part of this video series, which is discussing how to use normal maps to get a little more detail on lower poly or more simplified objects. Here is the genetically modified remote control laser ant that was in the first video in the scene. Here's a little closer view of it just so we can get a better look at it. And I'm going to hit the space bar to start the animation that I have, a very simple animation. And we can take a close look at all the angles, and we can see that the normal maps all update in real time, so it's pretty cool. And as we get in closer, we can see that they really do add quite a bit of extra detail in here. Now, this isn't really meant to be like photorealistic. This isn't going to be in the next Steven Spielberg movie or by any means whatsoever. And it kind of looks cartoony a little bit, or like something somebody made for maybe a puppet or something. So it has its own kind of cool quality look here. Obviously, you can do much better at making this look more photorealistic. I kind of like a stylized approach to my work, so it looks a little different than everybody else's. So if you are worried about photorealism, obviously you take a little more time. Okay, so then we'll take a look at the truck up close, or the rover. Okay, so here's the rover we'll be, this is the rover we'll be actually painting the model that I made. It's as I said in the first video, it's a very simplistic model with the point of showing that how you can use a very low model body or a low poly body and paint some cool details on it and make it look a little more complex than it really is. So I'm gonna hit the space bar, we'll see the rotational animation, and we can kind of take a close look at it. It looks pretty good. One of the things you'll notice about normal maps, I'll show you here in just a second if you don't know already, is that since they don't change the geometry at all, they aren't really there. So they're reflecting light like they are, but as we come into this section here and then look down the model, we'll notice that the facade of detail really starts to disappear as nothing really sticks out past the surface of the model. So that's a limitation of the normal map use. So up close like this, they really start to kind of fall apart a little bit, but when we back out a bit and get kind of far away, then things start to look a little better. So remember, we're not really going to replace true detail and true modeling with normal maps, but we can add a lot of cool detail. And for video games from a distance, a vehicle or something like that, this level of detail would probably be perfectly acceptable. And by the way, you can see right up here, the way I modeled this very simply, Substance Painter has a hard time with the edge wear in some spots just because of cheesy modeling. And I tried to leave this very low poly, so I didn't want to use a bevel modifier or bevel the edges or any of that kind of stuff. I just used the smoothing techniques that we've worked on. I did not fix this here, obviously, so this is one of those places where we would want to paint this out to make it a little better. Okay, so let's get right into it. Okay, here we are in Substance Painter. Let's get started. I'm going to come up here to File. We're going to hit New. We'll get this new project context menu. Let's change the document resolution to 2048. Let's change the normal map format to OpenGL. We select our model by coming right here where it says Select. Mine is on my desktop, and it is called Rover 1. So then let's just open that, and then we can hit OK. Now it'll take just a second to load this in. Okay, so here is our simplistic model that we are starting with, that we've been showing in the pre-video to this one, and the little intro to this video. Okay, so again, just to refresh, to move around within Substance Painter, we hold down the Alt key, and we hold our left click down, we can kind of orbit around. If we hold down the Alt key and our middle mouse button, we can grab to move it around where we want. And of course, scroll in, scroll out is just the scroll wheel. All right, cool. So let's look at this kind of from an angle here. We can see that this is very simple geometry, as I've stated multiple times. That's the purpose of this, is to see how we can get more detail on a very easy model. I mean, you could technically just have a very blocky body for your tank or your rover or vehicle or whatever. So anyways, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is normally we would come right here to Texture Settings, and we would bake mesh maps before we put a paint job on. In this process, though, we want to paint the normal channel first, and then we're going to have to export that map and then re-import it to use it as our normal map in our baked mesh maps, and then we can give it a paint job. So it's a little bit convoluted of how you have to do it, but it's really not that hard. Okay, so let's go back to layers, and we'll see we already have this one layer right here, layer 1. Now normally I would remove this and start working with fill layers, but this is the kind of layer we want. And in order to add just a regular layer or a paint layer, it's this icon right here. So we're just going to leave that there. And you may or may not know that once this layer is selected, everything down below here under properties is the properties for that layer. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to come down to this properties for this layer and go all the way down until we see all the channels we're working on. Right here it says material. We see color, height, rough, metal, and a normal channel. The only one we want right here is a normal channel, so let's click these off. Just left click each of these till they're turned off, leaving only normal activated. And we can see that all we have is this normal channel data right here. So this block is what we're really looking at. Before we do that though, let's come up here and change our environment settings. I'm going to change environment and opacity all the way up. And then I'm going to come down here where it says environment blur. Let's drag that over. And then I'm going to come down into the bottom here, this area called our shelf. And let's go all the way over here and go down to where it says environments and click on that. Now I'm going to grab this one right here, which kind of looks like another planet. So I'm going to left click and just drag it in. And we see we get this kind of another planet. If I pan around, you can kind of see there's other planets in the background. It's kind of a cool one for this kind of rover because it looks like something that might be in space. Okay, cool. So we only have a normal channel. I'm going to go back here in our shelf and let's change it to the one that says hard surfaces. So in our shelf selector, we can just click hard surfaces and we'll see that we now have these normal stamps to play with. Now these are the ones that are in here by default. So if you're using a free trial or you have a student version or whatever, these are the ones you'll have. There's a lot of companies online that sell packs of these and they're actually pretty affordable and there's some pretty cool ones out there. So if you do this kind of thing a lot, you might consider either A, learning how to make these or ordering somebody's pack offline. But these are the default ones and that's the ones I'm going to use. Okay, and then, so we're all set up. We have our channel just a normal on that one. And I'm going to get rid of this display settings. We have our normal channels, the only channel we're working on this layer. The next thing we want to do is I want to make this faster, so I want some symmetry. So if I stamp on this side of the truck or rover, I want it to also appear on the other side. And the way we can do that is just by clicking this button right here. And when we do so, we see we get this line down the middle, and then we can see a dot on the other side. I believe this is going across the x-axis. So whatever I do on this side where my brush is going to happen exactly across the center line on the other side of the vehicle. So that makes things a lot easier and things go a lot faster. Okay, so I'm going to bring this side of the truck in view. And remember, Alt is what we're pushing to move around, and left click will orbit us around. And then Alt middle mouse button will allow us to grab onto our vehicle to move it left and right. We'll have to get a pretty good view. It doesn't have to be perfect here because whatever surface this brush goes on, you can see how it changes its angle depending on the geometry. So that's pretty cool. We do, though, most of the time want to have a kind of a straight-on view, but you can get away with having it kind of angled even. All right, so how do we use these stamps down here? We have this box right here, and if we simply come over here and pick, I'm going to pick some kind of a door, which are down here. I'm going to probably pick this hatch right here. Let's just click it, left click, and drag it over, and just drop it right on the space that says normal. Now there it is, and then we can see that this is our brush, basically. Now, our brush over here is by default this kind of soft brush, so let's change that real quick. I'm going to come right over here to where it says brushes. And then we're going to go with this one that says basic hard. So click that and we can see our brush changed. So we're going to go with the hard brush here. Okay? And then now when we come down here, another thing we want to change is we have the hard brush, but we can see the edges of our object being cut off. And it's not so bad on this one. But on some of them, the alpha clipping is gonna cut the edges off. So let's real quick fix that as well. Come back down to our properties, and we're gonna find the section that says alpha. Now right here it has an X, if we just click that X, that'll go away, and we'll be able to see the entire object. You can see how now outside the circle we actually see stuff, whereas before we didn't see stuff, okay? All right, now we have our stamp. We're ready to paint, and it's as easy as just left clicking. But before we do that, we want to make sure we have it all set up. So let's talk about moving our brush around. So I'm going to hold down the Control key, and then I'm going to left click and then move forwards and backwards with my mouse, and you'll see that I can rotate my brush. And I just want to try to line it up kind of with the edges here so it looks pretty good. Now I can go a little bit bigger, so I want to hold down the Control key, right click, and move my mouse left and right, and the brush will get bigger. So I want to take up a little more space, and I want to make sure it looks pretty good. And that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to just go ahead and click with the left click, and we see it left the paint. It left it on there. Okay, so I'm just going to go real quick across the top here so we can see what we did. I'm going to try to space this the same so it looks good. And it's pretty easy to do. It seems like it would be harder to do than it is. But we can just try to make sure the spaces all look right. And we can get a pretty good approximation. That looks pretty straight. It's not too bad. So there you go. We've just, Control Z, you got to watch out for that. It's Alt and left click. So that's how that works. Yeah, sometimes you'll accidentally hit the left click without the Alt and you'll paint across a bunch of stuff. And simply Control Z to undo that. Okay, so we have a bunch of doors now on there. That looks pretty good. So remember to hold Alt down as you're moving around. And that looks pretty fair. Okay, so let's put some stuff along this edge here. And just to be sure, let's check and make sure that it painted it on the other side of our object. And there we go. We have the doors are exactly on the other side as well. So we just saved ourselves time and we get exact mirroring. So that's kind of cool. All right, let's get back over here. Let's do it a couple more times, and then I'm going to speed through this so we don't waste a bunch of time. Okay, so I want to turn this to C and then probably get in just a little closer. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the hard surfaces one in our shelf. It's pretty straightforward. Just grab onto the hard surfaces. And then I'm going to come down here where I can see the actual stamp we're using, which is right here. And then it's as simple as finding another door or whatever we want. I'm going to probably go with, let's go with this one this time. I'm going to left click and drag and just drop it right on here and it'll just change it to that one. Okay, so now I can come down here and mess with this. So again, to change its size, I can hold down the Control key and then right click and move my mouse left and right till it's the right size. And then we can move it in here. It looks a little bit crooked, so I'm going to hold down the Control key, left click, and then move my mouse forwards and backwards to get it to rotate to where it looks pretty straight. Something like that looks pretty good. All right, and then we can just go left click. That one was a little low, so Control Z. And we'll just keep on trucking. Make sure we're about the same space. Might want to do that one again. That looks pretty good. And then remember, I can hold down Alt and middle mouse to drag along. And then we're just going to keep on going. And the cool thing is, if I get out a little bit further than I was, the brush is going to stay the same size. So that's a really kind of a handy thing, I guess I would say. All right, so let's keep on going. I'm just going to stamp these in here real quick. Maybe one more. Okay, that looks pretty fair. And let's go over to the other side and make sure that we got them on the other side. And there they are. Okay, so let's do one more, and then I'm going to just keep on trucking and speed along here. And let's grab it up here. Let's do something up here. Let's grab another one from down here. Let's grab this one and drag it on. And then I'm just going to bring it up here somewhere like this. I want it to be a little bigger, so Control, right click, and move my mouse towards my screen or away from my screen. And we'll go something like this, and there we go. Okay, so we got that cool stamp. And it did it on the other side because we have symmetry. Let's put something right here. Let's find something else cooler. How about this thing here? Let's just drag this over. And then we're going to have to Control, right click, and make our thing a little bit smaller. And then we're going to try to center it up. And once we kind of get it centered, it takes a little bit of practice, not much. Something like that. We can stamp that on there, and we can see that we have a new detail on there. Okay, so we can do this all day long. Let's see what else we can do real quick. One more thing we can do is let's put some bolts on something like the tire, well, like one of the tires. So I'm gonna grab, let's see which one would look cool. Let's go with maybe something like this one, and I'm gonna left click and drag it over, and then we'll have to get down to one of the tires. And we can look at it, and then of course I need to make it a little bit smaller, so Control, right click, and then move my mouse in and out. Can make it just a little bit smaller. And then we can simply put some of these on here. Let's put it somewhere right there. I'm just eyeballing this. There's also a radial symmetry feature that you could use to put this on here as well, which is pretty cool. I'm just gonna eyeball this on because we're kind of, okay, so that looks pretty good, and it did it to the other side as well. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna stop. We've used multiple examples of it. It's actually quite simple, and then I'm gonna go ahead and detail the rest of this, and I'll just speed that part up just so we save a little bit of time. And I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so here we are back after the speed sculpt. We've added a lot of details to the truck, or the rover. I keep saying truck for some reason. I don't know why. And we can see that we've got details all over it. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to export this normal data to create a map that we can use to finish our paint job. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we have to create a preset for exporting this. So we're going to go up here to File. We're going to come down to Export Textures. We're going to get this Export Document window. We're going to go to the part that says Configuration. If we look right here, we can see under configuration, we have presets. We have the ability to see all these presets for various software. We can also come to the plus sign right here and click it and make our own preset. Now at the bottom, you can see we have this blue selection here that we can name whatever we want. If we double click, let's name it, I'm going to name it normal underscore, let's put OpenGL. And enter. Okay, so we now have created the name for that. So now we have to come up here where it says output maps. So we want to output maps RGB. Let's click that. And then we get this RGB box here. If we come right over here where it says converted maps, we're going to go to the one down here that says OpenGL. Let's left click and drag it right onto this RGB box. Okay, and then let's click RGB channels. Okay, so we've created a new preset. We've picked an OpenGL normal on an RGB channel, and that'll give us a preset that'll allow us to just send the normal out of Substance Painter to the file of our choice. Okay, so now let's go over here to export, and then let's pick the folder that we want this to go to. Mine's on the desktop. It's called Rover normal, Rover 1 normal. I'm going to click that, select that folder. That's where it's going to go. And then right here, we're going to open this window and make sure that we have our new preset. We're going to go OpenGL here. You can see I did one earlier just to make sure I was doing this right. But we're going to go with this one right here that we made. Click it. And now we'll see its configuration is just normal OpenGL. Okay, and then we're going to leave it at 2048. And then we're going to go ahead and export. So it's going to export using this configuration, only the normal channel, to the folder of our choice in this window. So let's go ahead and hit export. All right, and it'll export real fast just because it was only exporting one map. Okay, so we can just hit OK and we'll be done with that. Okay, so that should have went to the folder that we picked. And so now let's go through the process of bringing it back in. If we come over here and hit File, we can import resources, pick that one, and then we can add a resource. And then we can go to the desktop or wherever you saved it at. And I'm looking for Rover 1 normal. I'm going to open that up, and I want this one that says RGB. I'm going to click it, and then let's just open it. Okay, so now it says RGB is undefined. If we click right here, we can say that we want this to be a texture, and then import resources to either our current session, or we can make it permanently if we want to our shelf. I just want it for the current session, so I'm going to click that one. And then let's go ahead and import. Okay, so then if we come over here and look under our textures, we'll see RGB sitting right here. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is let Substance Painter bake its mesh maps in order to do its business. So the way we do that is we hit Texture Settings, and then that'll open this up. And then we hit the one that says Bake Mesh Maps. Okay, cool. So we are always going to get this baking menu. There's a normal map here. We're just going to leave the check in all these boxes. We definitely want an ID map because I made an ID map for this model in Blender like we have in the previous tutorials. Okay, so let's just go with it. I'm going to leave output at 2048, and let's just go ahead and bake these mesh maps. All right, so it'll just continuously bake these mesh maps that it needs to do its business. These aren't the ones we're going to end up with at the end, as I'm sure you know, but anyway. Okay, cool. So let's hit OK, and then we'll see that if we go back to layers, if I turn this layer off here, our data goes away. All that stuff we did goes away. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to replace the current normal map that they just baked. Let's go back to it, and we can see here's the normal map they used that they baked for us. And we want to come down here and replace it with this RGB one here. So if I left click and drag this one up here to replace this normal map, now we'll have that normal map in the right place. If we go back to our layers, we can turn this layer off, and we'll see that we're still using the new normal map that we baked and then re-imported. So it's pretty cool. So now we don't even need this layer anymore because the baked set of maps that Substance Painter is going to use to do this paint job are baked on here. So that's pretty cool. All right, so that's the technique of putting the normals on. I'll go ahead and real quickly texture this vehicle here, and so just bear with me. If you already know how to do that, then you've learned probably what you want to learn. Otherwise, I'm going to real quickly paint this vehicle. Okay, let's get to painting. I got rid of that layer that we had originally because we didn't need it anymore. We put in the new imported normal map, so we don't need that layer. So we're emptying our layer stack. I'm in the material section. I'm going to grab aluminum, left click, and just drag it right up here. Okay, so now we have a real shiny aluminum vehicle. I'm going to come down to its properties, to its color. I'm going to take the color down into a much darker gray, something like somewhere in here. Okay, and you have to click off to get rid of the color picker. All right, cool. So now we have a uniform color. We can change its roughness. If we want it to be real dull, we could, but I want it to be relatively shiny. But at the same time, I also want some grunge on here to break the uniformity of how it looks. So let's come over here to our shelf selection area, and let's pick grunge. And I'm going to come over here to this grunge leaks. I think it's this one. Yeah, I'm going to grab this and just toss it on the roughness right over here. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Now, something that we can do if this is a little too powerful is we can come up to its roughness value and change it's usually at base color, but you can actually change it to roughness. And so that on this channel, we'll be controlling the roughnesses opacity right here. So if we click here, we can actually take that down just a little bit so it's not quite as much. If I take it all the way down, we have none. All the way up, it looks pretty weird. Somewhere in the middle is where we want to be. So that'll give us just some a little bit of grunge. Another thing we can do is change the UV transformation. So let's take the scale up just a little bit. There we go. If we take it too high, it'll pattern out on us and it won't look good. So don't take it too high. This looks pretty good though. Okay, cool. So now we have aluminum that's darker with some grunge, a little bit of roughness data. All right, cool. So the next thing I want to do before we go on, we're going to add another aluminum layer of a lighter color so we can use a mask to get some edge wear. But before we do that, let's go ahead and paint some decals on here. It's pretty easy to do. It's almost just like what we did to get this normal data. So in order to do that, though, we need to create a new layer. We're going to come right over here to the top. This one looks like a stack of papers. If we just click that, that'll add over the top of our aluminum layer. That'll add a paint layer. Now I want to change the brush, so we're going to come over to brushes. Where is it? It's down here somewhere. Here it is, right here. And then we want this basic hard brush. Okay. All right. Now we want our flow and our everything else to be all the way up. So we want our opacity and our flow all the way up. And then if we come down in our properties for our paint layer, we can go to this one that says alpha. And if we come over here to the shelf selector, we can go also to alpha and click on it. And then we can pick any of these alphas, which is pretty neat. And the way we pick them is, I'm going to pick, I think it's down towards the bottom. It's a triangle. I'm going to probably pick this one right here. And all you do is you click on it and you'll see it selected here. You can also click and drag it over. So now the alpha that I have is this triangle. And if we look here, we can see that now I have a brush that's red. And everything looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and put it on some stuff. And we still have symmetry on from our previous process. You can see an X symmetry. All right, so let's put this right on the front here. So if we get a good view up front, we can point towards it. And remember, control, right click, and then I want to move my mouse forwards or backwards and I can make it bigger. Now you want to be careful that you don't change your flow or anything while you're messing around with your brush. So I'm going to go ahead and just stamp that on, and we see it's painted on both sides now. Let's go ahead and just put these all over the top here. That's probably looks kind of weird, but let's do it. Control Z. I have to actually use my rotate brush or my rotate tool, and then I'm just going to click these on like so. And like so. Okay, cool. So those look pretty good. Let's put some more on the back real quick, just for fun. We can put these really all over if we want, or not. Some vehicles have a lot of markings on them, some don't. So again, we're going to rotate, And then make sure that your flow, I'm going to come up here and just make sure my flow is there, because if I hold down the control key and left click and move forwards and backwards, I change the rotation, but if I move my mouse left and right, I change the flow. So it's a little tricky sometimes. So, but make sure your flow is all the way up because we want these to be nice and bright. Okay, cool. Let's get out here and do some of these doors here. I want to get a better view, and then we're going to hit Control and then left click, and then up and more forwards and backwards will be how we'll do it, because otherwise we'll change our flow. And then of course Control right click forwards and backwards will make it smaller or bigger. So we'll just stamp that on there. And then of course let's just change our view. Looks like it needs to be a little straighter, and then let's just stamp that on there. Okay, cool. So we've got quite a bit of paint going on here. Let's do some other fun stuff here. Let's put a radiation symbol, which is somewhere up in here. One of my favorites. I like to use it on a lot of stuff for some reason. Let's grab this one, click it, and you'll see it selected. We can bring this around the back, scoot in, and then let's put this right here in the center. And there we go. Cool, we got a radiation symbol. Oops. Now remember, if you don't hold down the Alt key when you try to move, you're going to paint all over stuff. I think I covered that in the first part pretty well. All right, and let's put a laser warning here. Let's find the laser sign. Let's click it. And let's put one right here. We have to make it smaller. Control, right click forwards and backwards. Let's put it something like that. All right, that looks pretty good. And then there's a warning symbol down here. Let's grab this, and we can get right below it. Zoom in just a little bit here, and let's just put warning laser. Now you won't be able to see it very good, but that's all right. We get the point. Okay, and then there's a nice one down here somewhere that says caution. I like this one. Let's click that. And then let's put this up under the vehicle, maybe right here. And of course, Control right click, zoom that up. Control left click forward with our mouse. We can get it to straighten out just a little bit. And then go ahead and stamp it right on there. Okay, so we have quite a bit of cool stuff, maybe just a little bit more. I think my voice is giving out for the day here. I've been at this for quite a while today. All right, let's grab this arrow here, and let's bring this right up to the front here, and let's put it right here. Try to make it straight as possible, and maybe a little smaller would help. And straighten it up just a little bit with the edges of the vehicle. Yeah, it's tricky sometimes. All right, right there looks pretty good. Yeah, it's a little crooked. All right, right there looks pretty good. Okay, cool. So we've got a arrow pointed forward. All right, and one more thing there towards the back here. Let's find it again. Oh, here it is right here. Let's click this one. Let's get our vehicle over here. Let's put something like this right in here. Again, Control right click will make it smaller. Control left click, and we'll straighten it up. Something like that. All right, that looks pretty good. That's probably about as far as I'm going to go with this part of the paint job. You could paint all over. It's pretty fun. They have all these decals. You can also make your own. They're basically black and white images, so you could use Photoshop or GIMP or whatever and make your own, so it's kind of neat. All right, cool. Let's move on with the next part. So the next layer that we're going to add on is a fill layer. So let's click that, and now we have this full fill layer. I'm going to go back to Materials, and let's just click on Aluminum. Now we have this real bright aluminum. And so I want this to be a little darker, so we'll come down to its properties. Click it, and then let's bring it down just a little bit. All right. And then I want to add a grunge on it as well. So let's find our grunges. I'm going to probably go with the same one here, grunge leaks. We're going to put that on the roughness. All right, and then we're going to come back up here, and we're going to change the scale just a little bit. Something like that. And then we're still selected roughness right up in here, so we can go to its opacity and change its opacity just slightly. Okay, cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a mask by left clicking, make sure it's selected, right click, and then we're going to add a white mask. And then with that white mask selected, we're going to right click and we're going to add a generator. And down here we can click on a generator and we're going to pick metal edge wear. All right, cool. So that gives us a lot of metal edge wear, which really looks kind of neat. If you check it out, it actually ate into our writing, which is pretty cool. That's why we put it over the first layer and under the second layer. So that's one of the cool things about it. Okay, cool. So now we're ready to start adding our ID maps to get different materials for different parts of our vehicle. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another fill layer, except I'm going to go to materials. And let's see. And then I'm going to add a fill layer. It's going to go right on the top, it should. And then I'm looking for the one that's silicone, I believe it is. It's something to do with silicone coat. Let's grab that. And now the entire vehicle has this weird silicone coat material on it. Okay, but what we can do here, since we made an ID map, is right click, and then we can add a map with color selection. If we come down here, we can pick the color, and I'm going to pick the tires. And so now only the tires have that material, so that's pretty cool. We're starting to look like a vehicle again. All right, one more thing I want to add. There's another color for this lens on this, whatever this is. I'm guessing it's the eye that helps this thing be an autonomous rover. So let's go to, I think I used copper. Let's see, where was copper? I don't want to take too long to do this because I'm probably wasting your time. I should have probably been a little more prepared on this. That's weird. I'm pretty sure there was a copper one. Ah, here it is right here. Okay, so I'm going to add a fill layer. It's on the top, and then I can just select this copper. Now the entire thing has it. Again, I want it to be a little grungier, so we're going to go up to grunges. And let's pick something like grunge dust small, and we'll drop that onto its roughness layer. So here's its roughness. So let's just grab it and drop it. So now it's all kind of grungy. And then this layer is only going to be the lens, so we're going to right click and we're going to add a mask with color selection, and we're going to pick the color, and I use this yellow color for it. Okay, so now it has its own deal, and it's got some stuff going on. So with its main color here, its layer section selected, we can roughness, we have its roughness selected. We can actually come in here and change its opacity as well. So now it's looking kind of coppery, and let's change its color as well. Let's go down here and just make it a little more orangey color. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, and so last but certainly not least, before we get out of here, I don't want to take up too much more time because this is probably running a little long. Let's add an overall dirt layer. So let's just grab this fill layer, add one more on the top, come down to its base color. If this is the scene we were going to use, we'd want to kind of match the dust to it. So let's bring this hue up just slightly, and then drag this in just a little bit, something like that. Okay, and we have to click off, and then let's come down to its roughness and make its roughness a lot less, so it's very dull. All right, and so last thing we want to do is we want to click on that, then right click, add a white mask, and then click, make sure the white mask is selected, right click, and then we're going to add a generator, and then we're going to select from our generator selections dirt. Okay, cool. And so we've got dirt all over our vehicle. We can come down to our properties for our dirt in our generator, and we can take the dirt level down just a little bit if we want. We can change the contrast up or down, whichever you like. I don't like it to be too contrasty. It looks kind of weird, so I'll back that up just a bit. And okay, cool. So that looks pretty good. So this is the texture set that we've created that I want to export out to be able to use in Blender. And as you know, the way you do that is you simply go to File, Export Textures, and then you'll get this export document. You'll need some kind of folder that it's going to go to, and then you'll want to use the proper configuration. Remember, we changed the configuration. I'm going to want to change that to, let's go back towards the top. I'm going to go to we're just going to go to this PBR metal roughness. That's the one we want to have in our configuration. And then I'm going to send this out as a 4096 by 4096 for more detail. So I've set a folder. We've changed the configuration back to PBR metal roughness instead of our custom preset. And we're ready to rock on exporting these. And so then you just hit export and it'll send all those maps to the folder of your choice. And I'll show a little rotator of this actual texture set in Blender at the end of this video. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.